Well, good morning, everyone. I've greeted you as participants in the annual forum yesterday and today, and I hope you're enjoying it. And I look forward to the reports in the media that you are filing and will be filing. This is the biggest and best Arangkada forum that we have had so far. I'd like to start by asking the JFC representatives that are here today to introduce themselves. I suppose we can go alphabetically, starting with AmCham, please. Peter?
Great, thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Hayden, and I have the honor of serving as the president of the American Chamber.
Dan?
Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Dan Alexander, and I'm the president of the Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce.
Is it Nabil?
Yes, good day, everyone. My name is Nabil. I'm French, and I'm the president of the European Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines.
And Japanese?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Keiichi Matsunaga. I'm the president of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Philippines. Thank you.
And I don't want CanCham to think I went out of alphabetical order. Julian?
No, I presume you left the biggest country in the North American continent to the last. My name is Julian Payne. I'm president of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce.
And we have two representatives from Pamori, both ladies, so it's not double trouble, it's double beauty.
Yes.
Mimi and Celeste.
Hi, I will go ahead, Celeste. Mimi Malvar, RHQs. Yeah.
And is Celeste with us too?
Yes, she is.
I'm on mute, sorry. This is Celeste Ilagan. I'm a director of Pamuri as well, with Mimi here. Thank you.
Great. Can I start with an announcement from the Joint Foreign Chambers, please? And then after that, we'll try to, in fact, this is my first virtual press conference. So it's a totally different environment than the usual one where we're all in a room together and have something to eat and drink. I apologize for that. But Peter, we have an announcement, and can I ask you to make it, please?
Absolutely, thank you, John. On behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers, I'm honored to make the following announcement. We've agreed to announce our new target for added foreign direct investment and jobs in the Philippines. When we launched Arangkada with DTI Secretary Domingo and PEZA DG de Lima at the BOI on December 10th, 2010, just 10 years ago, we targeted 10 billion in additional FDI and 1 million additional new jobs, assuming reforms are being made. I'm pleased to announce that these targets were achieved. As Arangkada Philippines starts its second decade, the Joint Foreign Chambers is setting a new target for the next decade of 50 billion US in foreign investment and 3 million new jobs for the Philippines. After all, the word Arangkada means to accelerate. The target is substantially above the current annual FDI of 8.3 billion for the 5-year period of 2015 to 2019. We can achieve these targets, but only with the support of our many partners in government and with the Philippine business groups. The potential for the Philippines is enormous and will be realized with the right policies for investment, including foreign investment. I think this is a pretty exciting announcement, and it is in tune with the last day and the days ahead of, I think, the exciting future ahead for the Philippines. And again, on behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers, honored to make this announcement. Thank you, John.
And thank you, Peter. That's very exciting news, but a lot of work to make it happen. Let's see, Tim, can you help me by seeing when hands are raised? There are questions in chat, but I don't see that I have a hand raising function. Do you have a hand raising function, Tim?
No, sir, but we will alert you if there are any questions.
Well, I see a lot of friends here and familiar faces and names. Who wants to go first?
Hi, hi, John.
Hey, hi. We have a columnist, a regular. Please identify yourself too. In this case, it's not a Oplas.
Yes. Good morning. I am Bienvenido Oplas Jr. I am a columnist in Business World. Now I'm Tuesday. My question for anyone in the panel is be the role of electricity, because Vietnam is a newcomer, and by 2006 it overtook Philippines electricity generation. In 2015 they overtook Malaysia, and in 2007 they overtook Thailand in terms of overall electricity generation. What Vietnam is saying to that foreign investors, come here, you will have no blackout here. And you go to other countries, you might have blackouts, you may have to buy your own expensive genset, and that will raise your cost of production. So my question is, as foreign investor, do you think that this is a big importance, not only the price, but as well as the overall supply of electricity in your operation when you come to the Philippines as well as other emerging countries? Thank you.
So the question is, the price of power in the Philippines a deterrent to invest in the Philippines? Is that right, Nodai?
Yeah, and not only price, but as well as the overall supply of electricity. Like for instance, in 2019, Vietnam has 229 terawatt hours of electricity. The Philippines only 105, or more than 2 times of ours. And as I said, in terms of power generation, Vietnam already overtook the Philippines in 2006. They overtook Malaysia in 2015. They overtook Thailand in 2017. So they just keep expanding the power capacity, and that is just saying a signal to foreign investors: come here, we'll have no blackout. So I'm just curious if this is this policy is a very important factor for foreign investors to come to a country. Thank you.
My guess is it depends on what sector you're in and what you're doing, but we happen to have 2 presidents, both Dan and Peter, that are in the still growing and in the past very fast growing BPO sector. So I was wondering if either Dan or Peter would like to comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, John. Peter, I can throw a few words in first if you like. I think it does certainly have an impact, and the price of power continually increasing is one thing, but it's also the reliability of the power. So at the moment, a lot of our BPO companies are needing to work from home due to the pandemic, and the power interruptions and brownouts and blackouts is having a significant impact on productivity when our people are all working from home. So it's I think you're very right. It is the cost of power is a concern, and the constant increases year on year, but also the reliability and constant availability of reliable power.
Okay, Peter, in your case.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for that. I agree wholeheartely with everything that Dan said. I think, our to go back to our new targets. I mean, I think there are a baseline, set of fundamentals that we believe need to continue to move forward, along with to attract increased foreign direct investment. And I think that's why it's so important, with recent tax reform, to continue to create incentives to bring additional foreign direct investment here to potentially offset some of the power costs and the risk that Dan mentioned. And I think additionally, we are there's a few things that we believe need to continue to move forward and hopefully continue to accelerate, which I think the pandemic has in some regards helped, but we need additional focus on the technology infrastructure. So it's not just power, but we need to see increased investment in access to internet and broadband technologies. As we know, the world has drastically changed in terms of work from home requirements and flexibility. On top of that, We also believe we need to continue to see investment in baseline infrastructure, and that includes additionally investments not just in power generation, which is a big strategic risk for the Philippines, but also everything from public transportation and the ease of access to commute, because we all know in the future at some point we will return to offices in some form or fashion, and the Philippines still has a long ways to go. So I think there are multiple I'll call them speed bumps in the road ahead. But from an American Chamber standpoint, and I think on behalf of the Joint Foreign Chambers, we see quite a bit of optimism and quite a bit of good momentum moving in the right directions. But power is certainly a risk. So those are the things I would add on.
Okay. I see a hand up from Roy Carnival. Roy, are you intending to ask a question? Can you come on, please?
Good morning. This question is for the JFC. I just want to understand, why are you setting an ambitious target when the CREATE bill was just passed in the Senate? Based on previous statements and press conferences from the people who are in this Zoom call, a lot of you expected either massive job loss or at least less job growth in the long term once the transition periods expire. So I just want to understand, why are you optimistic for the next 10 years? Thank you.
Who wants to take that? I can comment in part because I had presented the positions of the industries on job loss based on the Trabajo bill. And it would have even been worse based on the original DOF proposal. But it took 3 years to go from that original proposal to where we are when presumably the president signs CREATE shortly. And during that period, partially because of the pandemic, but because of intense discussions between the Congress, the executive, we came out with a much better transition. So that's the main explanation, because we are much more optimistic because of the final result, which is, after all, the legislative process. But others may wish to comment.
John, if I may add, there, I think I think the question is interesting, and watching the forum, the Arangkada forum, we have discussed at length about the potential of the country, and it's clear that this COVID crisis is just a bump in the road. The fundamentals are remaining good, healthy, and strong, and the future of the Philippines is not canceled; it's just postponed. But on the other hand, and to come back to your question, this is a target. And yes, we are optimistic. Yes, we have the potential. But on the other hand, it's important for us to be in a position to unfold this potential. And to, if we want to deliver and if we want to achieve this target, we will have to act decisively and to work hand in hand with the government, as the GFC has always been doing, to unfold this potential. So that's extremely important, in my opinion. If we just sit there, this will not be realized. We need to act decisively, and we don't have much time to do it.
I will also try to answer, John, on speaking for the ROHQ industry. I think, Roy, when we did that press con, there was a lot of uncertainty on where CREATE would net out, right? But after the deliberations and after Senator Recto and Senator Cayetano had threshed out the issues, there is a continuing hope, I guess, insofar as our industry is concerned, that existing locators will be able to continue enjoying incentives under the new CREATE bill, under the new Strategic Investment Priorities Plan. And we are really banking on that kind of assurance and hope that despite a short transition period that was given to us, this particular industry will continue to be promoted by government as per DOF and the Senate interpellations, will continue to be promoted by government under a different legal framework, but our investments and continued investments will still be taken and readily accepted, I guess, by government. So we're still quite hopeful that the government continues to support this industry, and hopefully when Create is signed at the end of the day, then that assurance to existing locators and also future locators for this particular industry will be continue to be promoted and protected.
I wonder if I can add a word, John.
Please, such a large country, you could add large words.
Hopefully not too long. I think the important thing to note is that the target is a 10-year target, a long-term target. When we were talking about Create, we were talking about the impact of Create over the next 3 years, assuming pretty well everything else would stay equal. But the very important thing that Peter Hayden mentioned when he announced the target was that the potential for the Philippines, I'm quoting here, is enormous and will be realized with the right policies for investment, including foreign investment. That includes many other things despite Create. It includes FTAs, it includes infrastructure, includes the labor code, you can go on and on. It includes eventually moving CIT down, for example, to the ASEAN average of 20%. What the target represents is a potential with all the appropriate policies put in place. What the concerns expressed with Create was what was going to be the immediate impact without this longer term potential being taken into account. So we're really comparing apples and oranges when we compare a target for the whole decade with what was going to be the immediate impact with what were the original provisions of the tax reform. Thank you.
John, can I add one additional comment too, please?
Please, please do.
Yeah, Julian, I think that's a whole host of wonderful points that you made there. The other thing I'll add on is literally for 3 years, as the tax reform has been kind of iterating and evolving, it has left the business community in a state of uncertainty. And I think one of the things that, I think all of us would agree as investors with foreign direct investment, we want to understand and have predictability in as many variables as we can. And I think one of the positive moves forward is now we, assuming Create moves forward and is signed by the president as is, we have a sense of what that variable now looks like, for the next few years. And to Julian's point, there's a whole other host of things that we want to continue to evolve from a policy standpoint. And together, over the course of the long term, I think we can achieve some really great outcomes for the Philippines. So I think there's some positivity in just knowing what is actually solidifying as Create comes to the legislation process.
Okay, I have something to add too, but who else is commenting first?
Mr. Forbes, Ms. Bernie of Manila Bulletin would like to ask a question.
Excuse me, but let me add another thing. As you know, the Create bill covers corporate income tax, which is very positive, and Julian added our eventual advocacy is 20%. But on the rationalization of fiscal incentives, and for exporters, that is true, what we've been saying. But there are many other parts of the economy that are totally separate. For example, we have this afternoon a representative of an American private equity company that has invested over $1 billion in the Philippines in the last 12 to 18 months in brownfield. They've invested, and they'll talk about it. Please watch that. And there are other, that's because the Philippines was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And they saw, and you just heard on the last panel, the opportunities that we heard from tourism and agriculture for foreign companies to come in because of the 110 million people in the domestic market. That is still there. You also have power generation and renewables. And with PSA being passed, you will be opening up telecommunications and transportation. So the larger picture is the basis of our target. I'm sorry, again, we say who has asked a question? Is it Irma? Or
Miss Bernie Magila, sir, of Manila Bulletin.
Bernie, sorry. I didn't. Bernie, could you please ask your question?
Hi, this is Bernie. Just want to know if what are the growth the growth drivers that you are seeing in the next decade? That's until 2030. So, aside from create, what other sectors or other factors that you see that will push for the $50 billion target? And what are the growth sectors that you see foreign investors coming in?
We have quite a bit among the JSE presidents. We have quite a bit represented. We have the Japanese, and we have BPO. We have people with views on mining. Who would like to start?
John, I'm happy to start on at least from a BPO standpoint. You know, I still believe that the Philippines globally is the absolute best market for you know, caring for U.S. consumers, and I think you know, through the challenges of the pandemic, one of the things that has been great for the Philippines is how resilient the BPO industry has been through you know, this kind of global black swan event. I think there is additional opportunity ahead as companies look to create you know, really great service options for with great economic advantages. And I think the Philippines, like I said, is one of the best places in the world to have customers taken care of. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think there'll be, you know, a decent chunk of growth, you know, in the future. Again, as companies look to you know, have economic savings and reinvest some of that savings in growth post-pandemic. So that's my perspective just on the BPO sector.
Thank you, Peter.
John, maybe I can add something on manufacturing.
Please.
Yep. So again, I think the question is interesting, and definitely we have seen it at the beginning of the forum. One of the strengths of the economy is that the GDP growth is driven by private consumption. More or less 70% of the GDP growth from the private consumption, and that's a great asset for the country. So there is, when it comes to manufacturing, there is ample room to develop. And but I'd like to stress the fact that if we want the Philippines to become this magnet for foreign investors, it's essential to act quickly and decisively, because the arena is extremely, the competition is fierce. And today it's clear that we are working in the right directions. But if our competitors are running, it's not going to be sufficient. And now we are extremely anxious looking at what's happening in the neighboring countries, especially countries like Vietnam, that seems to be, you know, bouncing back much better than the Philippines in this COVID crisis, especially when it comes to FDI, but also GDP growth, because Vietnam, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the GDP growth will be positive this year. So it's essential that, you know, the Philippines to be attractive for foreign investors, that so we get a stable and a predictable regulatory framework. That's one has already been mentioned, a level playing field competition, and to be, I mean, and to be more attractive than our neighbors. So we really need, if we want to deliver again, we really need to walk the extra mile. It's not going to come like this. If we don't do anything, we will not manage to get to this target.
Thank you, Nabil.
I would like to comment a little bit on something, John, if I may. as an example, take the mining sector. Now, the Philippines has incredible mining resources that some of those other countries do not have. So we have an advantage if we can exploit it. So the real question in mining is not the availability of the resources, it's the availability and understanding that mining can be environmentally and sustainable, socially sustainable, that it can be well regulated and it can be encouraged. So this, you go back to Peter's initial point. The potential is enormous with the right policies. And that's the key point, it's the right policies. And there's a number of areas where the Philippines has unique resources, not entirely unique, but mining is one. Tourism. I mean, tremendous potential tourism, but we need the right policies to take advantage of these unique strengths. In other sectors like manufacturing, you have keen competition with all of the major ASEAN 5, and therefore our policies have to ensure competitiveness. So we have two slightly different situations here. But the bottom line is the key point that Peter said in his opening with the target, the right policies. And that includes not only taxes, it includes labor code, it includes all sorts of things. And that is what we really have to focus on as we move. Now that we've settled CREATE for the moment, we have to look ahead and say, what are the other policies that we really have to reform, fine tune, cancel, create, or what, to really ensure this potential in all of the 7 big winner sectors.
And I would just add, and I would add creative industries.
John, maybe a few words.
Yes.
Celeste. Yeah, I think that all of us are watching the formulation of the SIPP that the BOI is leading to formulate. That is going to be really important for us because these are the activities that will be incentivized by government, and therefore the transition from the regular IPP to that SIPP is an important process that all of us will surely watch to make sure that our industries are included and therefore supported by government.
Johnson, also, may I add?
Yes, please.
Yes, from the Japanese Chamber's perspective, I think their biggest driving force for the next decade must be infrastructure. And especially, as you know, Japanese government support the MRT3, LRT1, and the metro subway system, and also Malolos Tutuban railway system. And, you know, Japan is a very similar population, and also the land size and many islands, very similar. But in Japan, we have 17,000 kilometer railway system. But here in the Philippines, only 70 kilo. And there is a big potential for the railway system. And also we are suffering from the traffic jam on the road. So I think most important driving force might be infrastructure. And among all the railway system, I suppose. Thank you.
And I think just to echo what Julian said, John, just in terms of mining and responsible mining, I think there's such a wonderful opportunity here in the Philippines with the underdeveloped resources that we've got here. And I think, you know, freeing it up and welcoming in some of these more responsible miners and the ones that are already here will go a very long way into, you know, achieving the 50 billion target. And also you just think about the job creation in some of these far-flung areas. I think it'd have a wonderful impact on the Philippines, but also, you know, would certainly help us achieve these targets.
May I just add something to that, Dan? First of all, if you just took Tempacan, you would add a huge amount of that investment. Exactly. But for those of you in the media who are interested, next Thursday at 2 o'clock, we're going to have a JFC webinar very specifically on the economic benefits of mining in the Philippines. And this will address the very question that we've just been discussed. So I invite you all to participate in that, 2 o'clock next Thursday. the economic benefits of mining for the post-pandemic recovery in the Philippines.
Are there other comments from the presidents? If I would add, I would build on what Matsunaga-san just said about infrastructure. The current annual spending, not including power and telecommunications by the government, is $20 billion US. That's 2.5 times what it was 6 years ago. Now we're not going to get the 7% that was targeted, but even at 20 billion a year, and again growing with GDP, and then 5 years out, 10 years out, with PPPs, there's going to be a lot of spending on infrastructure and opportunities for foreign investors in that area. So can we move to the next question?
Hi, John. Can I have a follow-up question?
No, if there are no others, are there others first? I don't mean any ladies, or they'll come in after yours, no, then. Shall I read it out? Is it, or you just want to ask it? Please ask it.
Yes. Supposing you're a big multinational manufacturing company, a multinational manufacturing company leaving China, and you're supposing, just hypothetical question, case, supposing your destination is limited only to Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines. So of those 4 countries, what are your top 2 considerations where to put your investment?
Maybe I can add, Nabil, you run a big manufacturing company.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Nonoy, for the question. You make it very hard for me because you just want 2 considerations. And there are many considerations when you move a business from one country to another. But if I had to select the top 2, I would say the first one, you want your asset to be safe. You want to be sure that when you invest, you put some money in a country, your asset is going to be safe. And when I say you want to be safe, you want to have a clear vision on what's going to be and what is the regulatory framework. That's the first one. And the second one also, I mean, you got to, I mean, because you know you run a business, it's not an NGO, so you have targets in terms of return of investment and things like this. So you're going to look at the profitability, and then you're going to compare what's happening in the Philippines and what's happening in the other countries. But just to go to another one, if I can add a third one, it's the infrastructure. Just bouncing back of what has been said by Matsunaga-san. Infrastructure is key. How, I mean, and the ease of doing business. How are you going to operate this in this country? The airport, is it going to be easy to commute? How much time are you going to waste in the traffic and things like this?
And Peter and Dan, you work for big multinational companies. I don't even think you have these kind of operations in China, do you? You're already here.
We're already here.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my point on, I think from a BPO's perspective, like there really, we've looked at other countries. There really isn't an option. One of the big strategic advantages of the Philippines is understanding, deep understanding of Western culture, and obviously the English skill set. I think one of the things that, to go back to Julian's point, there's a whole host of policies and things that we want to see continue to evolve. And I think for the BPO sector, we need to continue to focus on education and obviously getting the workforce ready for more digital, servicing and things like that. But that stuff is on its way. More to do there, but optimistic.
Anyone else want to comment? Of course, if you're following all of the talks that are going on during the forum, there are many things that are coming out that answer these sorts of questions. I'll give you one example that came out yesterday. It had to do with Vietnam being close to China and therefore having an advantage over the Philippines in getting all the parts you need in assembly of final electronic and manufactured goods, textiles, little parts for toys, for electronics. And the answer was, the question was, the Philippines is at a disadvantage. And the answer was, no, the Philippines is not at a disadvantage. In global terms, in regional terms, the Philippines is just as close to China as Vietnam. They just have to work out the supply chain and the logistics. Very interesting. So I'll move on to the next question. Hello? Everybody, very shy people today.
Can I make a comment on infrastructure while people are collecting their questions?
Sure.
If you look at the history of countries such as Canada or the US, these countries, when they were pioneering countries, it was infrastructure that opened up the West in both countries. If you go even further back in history, it was infrastructure that expanded and sustained the Roman Empire. It was roads, railroads, bridges. Now it's internet fiber connections. But infrastructure is essential for opening up and expanding an economy regionally and tying a country together. And I think we should see in the Philippines, infrastructure is not just improving transportation in Metro Manila, it's actually linking the potential areas throughout the archipelago by efficient sea lanes, by bridges, by railroads, by internet. This is the significance of infrastructure in tying the whole country together. So the country as a whole is much more than the sum of its parts.
Well, we certainly, Julian, are seeing more spending on infrastructure than before. I mean, the railroad, I disagree with you. No, I see your question, Nonoy, is a lot of the infrastructure is repair. I'm not so sure about that. If you look at DPWH budgets over the years, roads are going up everywhere. I see roads everywhere when I travel, new roads, and Mindanao has been getting a larger share ever since the Aquino administration. And the rails, you just saw the bidding for the South Commuter rail, and the North Commuter going up to New Clark City has been bid out and is under construction now, and the subway. That was the dream plan that the Japanese government, JICA, provided at the request of NETA in the last administration. Now it's starting to be implemented. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Now, if of course, all of these reforms that people are talking about, like PSA, are not actually implemented, then one would be less optimistic. But other countries are doing it, and the Philippines has done reforms in the past. So we're assuming that reforms will be made in the future and the investors will come.
John, if I may also, and just to underline what you just said, you know, if you look at infrastructure, you can link it to the consumption of cement per year and per inhabitant in the Philippines. So today, this ratio is close to 300 kilograms. So we are all consuming more or less 300 kilograms of cement on a yearly basis in the Philippines. And when we compare this with some of the neighboring countries, like Malaysia, for instance, you know, it's not out of reach to go to 500 kilograms and above. So it shows that we have ample space to grow, and that if the infrastructure program goes, we are poised for a very fruitful future there.
Thank you, Nabil. Roy, I understand you have a question.
Hi, sir. I just want to go back to your earlier point. I understand that Mr. Forbes, you mentioned earlier that the CREATE bill that was passed recently is different from and better when compared to the original version passed 3 years ago. but even the Senate bill already increased. But if you look at it, like earlier this year, the Senate bill already increased the transition period. And even then, some groups, like for example, the BPO industry, wanted it to be longer, saying there would be adverse impact on the industry because it still didn't take into account the impact of the pandemic. So I guess my question is, I would just like to clarify, what do you think would be a more appropriate statement to reflect the position of the GFC? Would it be safe to say that the 50 billion target can be reached partly because of the CREATE bill? Or would it be more accurate to say that the target can be reached in spite of the CREATE bill? Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to say yes or no to that answer, but I want to ask the presidents of the JFC if they would like to comment on how important the CREATE bill is. Mimi, do you want to add to your, with respect to RHQs, add something more to what you said earlier?
Mimi, you are on mute. It's.
Does anybody see Mimi or Celeste?
Yeah, maybe we got frozen. Yeah. John, maybe just to on the CREATE bill, it's not really answering the question. Is that, but it's just again timing. Timing is essential. And now we've been discussing for long. Before it was CITIRA, now it's CREATE. Now that's good. No, it has been passed in the Senate, but timing is essential. And this has created, a little bit of a uncertainty. It's essential for the future, for the potential investors to know what's going to be the corporate income tax in the future and to be sure of what's going to happen. So my comment would be is that now it has already lasted for some time, and it's important. It's high time to get a clear document on this matter.
I think all of us would agree with that in the government and the private sector. It was a controversial proposal in some ways on the fiscal incentives. The CIT reduction was very positive, and overall, I think we're welcoming the bill. The main concern that has come out is on the level of review for the that the IPAs cannot approve over 1 billion pesos. Our position, as you know, had been $500 million. And that's going to be a work in progress as the FIRB begins to function on these. And they have the authority, of course, to raise that level. And Section 301 gives the executive branch a lot of authority, as Yusek Aldaba was pointing out yesterday in her speech. And tomorrow morning, we have Undersecretary Rodolfo of the BOI. So please listen to those two speeches. There's a lot of flexibility to do a lot of attracting foreign investors under the CREATE bill. And all these advantages of the Philippines. Again, I go back to creative industries. If you go back and watch the recording of what can be done there, the discussions of things like graphic design tunnels between London and Hollywood, you can do that from here. There's so many things. You have an advantage in English. You have a large workforce. You upskill it, digitize the digital world, telemedicine, so many things. So the potential is enormous, and we're confident in the next decade that more of it will be realized. And I think yes, we're about to run out of time.
Go back to your point, John, that is all very good, but then you go back to the earlier point that an essential is a reliable and adequate power supply. It's adequate internet speed. So infrastructure is now taking on some different dimensions, but nonetheless, it's infrastructure. And we can do exactly what you suggested if you want a tunnel from Hollywood to London. But you have to have an adequate, reliable power supply to ensure that that industry, creative industry, is going to be able to work competitively. So I think that we get back to this issue of infrastructure and the definition of infrastructure, which actually is now wider than just roads and bridges and railroads.
No, but I think Peter and Dan can tell you that they have a lot of redundancy, and their industry. I mean, they've had some problems adjusting to work from home in the pandemic, but they've grown with solid infrastructure. Am I wrong, Dan or Peter? You've always had power, and you have to have good internet in order to serve the world.
Yeah, you're right, John. You know, in our offices, we do have, you know, internet that sustains us and backup power sources and that sort of thing when we do run into issues off the grid. But, you know, just this pandemic itself has shown the impacts that it has when we need to work from home. And I think to Julian's point, it's that consistent, reliable source of internet and the source of power that's just so important in you know, as we said, trying to achieve those targets, right? So it's also being able to have you know, productivity in people's homes or in some of the further flung areas of the Philippines. It's so important.
Yeah, and I'll pile onto that too, Daniel. Like, I think you know, within our offices, we have zero issues, and quite frankly, we have extremely reliable high-speed internet and power. I think one of the big, you know, foundational aspects, you know, that we haven't really talked about is, you know, we're talking about a 10-year horizon. We're talking about post-pandemic, which, you know, we're hoping that you know, as we go through 2021 and as you know, vaccines become available in the Philippines, you know, we're also optimistic about, you know, returning to offices and infrastructure. You know, I think one of the things that, you know, I'm an optimist when I look at how the pandemic has helped accelerate, you know, some of the changes that we're already starting to see in the Philippines, just in the increased number of cell towers and some of the bureaucracy that's been taken out in order for telcos, and then opening up the market to additional technology providers. I think the pandemic has served in some regards as a catalyst to some of that change, and I'm optimistic that that will continue to progress, you know, in the future as we come out of the pandemic as well. So.
All right. Do we have any further comments from the JFC officers? I think we have run over the time we allotted, and there are ongoing breakout sessions at the moment, and we will resume the forum at 1:30. I think Noynoy has a comment he's sharing with us, but I want to, in the chat box, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and joining the forum. And I really apologize that we can't give you a good meal and or even coffee, but we promise when we can get back to whatever the future normal is, and we're back in hotels, that we hope to see you there in the future and in between. So thank you very much for joining today.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
John.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.